Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Sean Corney, and I'm the Communications Officer at Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Our webinar today, Office 365 Implementation Consideration, will be presented by Matt Walton, Senior ICT Consultant at InfoExchange. If you have a question during the webinar, please type it in the question box on your GoToWebinar panel, and we'll pause about halfway through to answer any questions you might have. Don't forget, a recording of the presentation and a copy of the presenter slides will be sent to you all in the coming days, so please keep a lookout in your inboxes. That's all from me, so I'd now like to hand over to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Sean, and welcome everyone. As Sean said, I'm a Senior IT Consultant at InfoExchange, and we're a not-for-profit who works with other not-for-profits to help them improve their use of technology. Now, one of the ways that we do that is through helping organisations implement Office 365. So today's webinar is all about sharing some of those experiences with you who are, this is one of a series of webinars, and this one's more designed for organisations who are looking at implementing Office 365 and have got an idea of what it is, but are looking at how they do that. Although in saying that, we've had many organisations who are already using Office 365 benefit from these webinars to think of what else they can use it for. So, yeah, when you implement Office 365, it's very diverse, and you can see there we work with large and small organisations. So we work with everyone from organisations with no staff that are just small volunteer-led organisations to large ones with 6,000 staff. So the implementation and how you use Office 365 is quite different depending on the type of organisation and what your goals are and what you want to get out of Office 365. So hopefully today will give everyone a sense of what could work for their organisation. So the agenda for today, I'll give a little bit of an overview of what is Office 365, but to be honest, that's a whole other webinar that we run, and Ryan from Connecting Up runs as well. It does more of that demo and shows you each application. What we'll focus on is some of the benefits and then how you apply each of those parts of Office 365 and some of the things to consider before you implement each one. And then as we go, we'll talk about things like the business case and staging, what infrastructure you need to consider as related to Office 365, and also things like mobility and privacy and security. As Sean mentioned, we will stop for questions about halfway, and we'll also try and save some time at the end for questions. I'm also available. My email address will come up on the screen at the end, so feel free to contact me directly if there's anything specific to your organisation that you really want to know. Happy to follow that up offline. All right. So what is Office 365? Now, I'm assuming many of you will know this, but it is a little bit confusing, to be honest, what it is, because you see it advertised on billboards. You know, you can buy it from Officeworks, and then you've got this thing which now not-for-profits get. So really what it is, it's a platform that Microsoft have developed that's a cloud-based platform that they host, they look after the servers, they keep it all up to date and do all the certifications and all the back end, and that it can be accessed from any device. So it doesn't matter if it's a Mac or an iPad or an Android phone, you can access the information from any device nowadays. One of the other key things it does is it has replaced or can replace some of the applications that you used to install on a server. So things like Exchange, SharePoint, and Link are now things that Microsoft are hosting on your behalf instead of selling you the software to install yourself. So really, it takes away all those headaches of having to maintain a server to run an Exchange or SharePoint, and then keep that up to date, and then rebuild it every few years when you need a new server or a latest version of software. The other thing that it does is Office apps and Office web apps. So most of you will all know Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint and OneNote and Outlook and others. You now get that as web apps, which means you can log on from any computer and be able to write a Word document regardless of what you've got installed on that computer. It means you don't necessarily have to go to Officeworks or JB and go and buy that $200 copy of Office that you used to have to do. You can also get that copy of Office that you install on your desktop, so Office 2016 is the latest one, but you can get that through Office 365 if you want to. You can keep doing it the way you've done it if you want to, but you can have the latest copy of Word, Excel, PowerPoint installed on your desktop as part of your Office 365 plan. So in a nutshell, that's broadly the platform that Office 365 is, but it really means that you don't have to worry about all that back-end service. It's going to be up 99.9%, and you just use the features and functions that you want to use. So when I say the features and functions of Office 365, basically what they've done, they've got a whole suite of applications. Now this is my menu. I actually took this screenshot yesterday because it does change quite regularly, and if I had have taken it 2 weeks ago, some of these might not have been in there. You see the one planner there with a tick on it and a little asterisk? That's because it's new and it just came out this week. So essentially it's a suite of applications that Microsoft have developed separately but have now put into one single platform. So most of you will be used to mail, calendars and people. That's what you used to have on Exchange. But now you also have OneDrive and SharePoint for documents and collaboration. You have Yammer for collaboration, and there's a whole heap of other add-ons. You see you've got Word, Excel, PowerPoint and OneNote there, so I can go in and do that. And then there are some things where you actually have an add-on or another plan where you can buy it. So you see CRM there. That comes up in my Office 365 because I use CRM as an add-on. It's an additional cost, but most of you probably won't use CRM. Power BI is in a bit of a similar boat where it's a bit of an add-on. But anyway, so that's an idea of the suite of Office 365 applications, and that will continually grow and change. And like I said initially, don't feel you need to use them all, particularly up front. Feel free, if you just want to use mail, calendars and contacts, perfectly fine. So I'll get to the good stuff, which is really what do we get for free? And Microsoft are very generously donating what they call an E1 plan. Now, just to be clear, this isn't a cut-back cheap version that Microsoft are offering. This is the same product that people like BHP, Queensland Police, South Australian Government, and a lot of large not-for-profits and health providers and universities use as and pay a lot of money for. So, you know, anything from $20, $30 a month. Microsoft are giving it to eligible not-for-profits for free. So this is the E1 plan. There are lots of different plans, and we'll touch on a few of them later. So essentially you get unlimited users. So you could have 2 staff on an E1 plan, or you could have 2,000, 20,000 if you wanted. It doesn't matter. So these are essentially email addresses. You can get 20,000 email addresses if you really wanted to, for your staff and volunteers. You get 24/7 phone support from Microsoft for Office 365 related issues. Now, the key things that you do get in that circle there or on the list is 50 gig Exchange mailbox per user. Now, for those who don't know what 50 gig is, I would consider myself a very heavy user of Office 365. My mailbox is about 5 gig, and I don't actually think it'll get much better. If I'm lucky, I might get to 10 gig. So 50 gig is a lot of storage. an organisation I used to work with, we used to cap people's email accounts at 1 gig. So Microsoft giving you 50 gig for free, I don't know of many clients who actually get to that. That's for your each email account. OneDrive is per user storage of documents and images and videos as well if you like. You can get 1 terabyte, which is again a lot of storage. Most people will never use this. Most people don't have this much storage on their PCs, and you'd need to store a lot of episodes of Game of Thrones to be able to even get close to 1 terabyte. You also get separate storage for your organisation in SharePoint. So each organisation gets a terabyte of storage plus 500 meg per user. So if you do the maths, if you've got 100 users, obviously it's 1 terabyte plus 100 times 500 meg. So depending on the size of your organisation, you can store a lot of data in SharePoint as well. In E1, you also get basic mobile apps. So I love the Outlook app that I use a lot. And you can get other apps like Word and Excel, which are read-only. And you can get Yammer and OneDrive apps and all that sort of thing. You also get the Office web apps. So I mentioned before, Word Online, Excel Online, OneNote, PowerPoint Online. You can access them through a web browser on any device. So that's what you get with the E1 plan. As you can see in the circle there, you also get Skype for Business video conferencing, access from anywhere, easy to manage admin portal, and a financially backed SLA. Now, some of you may be saying as part of E1, okay, well, what's not there? So one of the things that you don't get free and that most people need, and some people go on this plan, an E3 plan. So most people are going to an E3 plan or having some sort of other arrangement to get Office Pro Plus. Now what Office Pro Plus is, it's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, OneNote, Publisher, all of those things stored on your desktop. So that means that you can actually have work offline, you can have the full functionality of Word, Excel that you used to, and you always get the latest version. So Office 2016 is the current one, but if you buy it through the E3 plan here, or I mentioned down the bottom as well, there's another plan called the Office 2016 Pro Plus where you just get Office. It's $290 per user per month. Now with that, you actually get 5 copies of Office per user. So me, for example, I have Office apps on my iPhone. That's 1 copy. Office apps on my iPad, Office apps on my Mac at home, and Office apps on my laptop. Now, if I lost my laptop or something like that, or I went away and stayed at a friend's house for a week, I could go off and install that 5th license on someone else on another computer and then take it off when I was finished with it. So I have 5 copies of Office to work with as a user. The other option, which a lot of organisations are doing, and to be honest it's probably the most cost-effective option, is buying that copy of Office through Connecting Up, like most people have done for the last however many years. So you can buy Office 2016 Pro Plus for $56. Now that copy could last you up to 4 years. So you get 2 years and then software assurance. So when if Office 2018 comes out in 2 years, you do the upgrade and that could last you another 2 years. So if you, I suppose, break 56 down into 4 years, then it's obviously a little bit cheaper than $290 a month. So that's the, but you only get 1 copy of that, and it doesn't include mobile apps. So that's the decision that each organisation makes. The other thing that the E3 plan does is provide you with what's called legal hold and archiving for your email. So essentially what that does is it keeps a copy of all the emails that have ever been sent and received by your users, and it keeps a copy of them regardless of whether they or you delete their mail. So if I went in and deleted my sent items and then I left the organisation, if my organisation had E3, they would still keep all those emails. So some organisations value that, some don't need it. So totally up to you. So there are a few different licensing options, and the licenses can be a little bit confusing, but essentially you can mix and match as well. So the common scenario that we see is organisations giving all their staff and volunteers and board a free E1 license. And then a couple of their managers who have mobile apps and who need that functionality on 5 devices, they could give them an E3 plan or a $2.90 a month plan. But you've also got desktops in the office, and they're just individual desktops that have Office on them. So those ones, it probably makes more sense to just buy the $56 copies from Connecting Up. So you can have a mix, and that's usually the most appropriate way to do it from a cost point of view. So hopefully that clarifies some of the differences between the plans and which plan your organisation might use. So the real confusing bit, I suppose, for many organisations, but the great bit for most of you, is how do we use Office 365 and what do we use it for? So you notice there, and I'm not going to read out every one of them, but you notice there that there are a lot of features and functions, and some of them are replacing things that you've already done. So things like the email platform and booking of resources and rooms and contacts and calendars. That's what you used to do in your Exchange server. Other things like business intelligence and dashboards, a lot of organisations aren't doing already. So they're like, great, that's an additional feature on top of what we could just use our email for. Other things like document management is what many people used to do on their file servers. So you could store client information or offline documents, or have an organisational intranet or that cloud-based storage. Some organisations really use it for security and reducing risk. So that whole mobile device management and making sure their passwords are secure and making sure all their data is backed up so that if their server, crashes overnight, that you're not going to lose any information. So each organisation that we work with has different priorities and uses different features of Office 365 to meet those priorities. But in general, we're finding that, again, all of these are basically for free. So, it's picking the applications that suit your organisation and help you work and collaborate and hopefully make your life easier, not more complicated and focused on technology. So what we typically recommend as the first step, and to be honest, this is very general and it applies to most things in technology and in life almost, not specific to Office 365, but the first step before you go off and start playing with it and really setting up your SharePoint site or jumping into Yammer, it's taking a step back and really thinking, okay, well, what as an organisation, what do we need? What's going to help us deliver our organisation's mission best and serve our clients? And then pick the use cases that suit those requirements. So, and often, if you can answer these questions, the next question, which is, okay, what tool do I use, whether that's email or SharePoint, that is a lot easier to answer if you've had this. So really it's who's using it. Is it just for staff? Is it for volunteers? Is it for boards? Is it for full-time staff at a desk? Is it for remote staff out and about? And why are they accessing it? So is it just email? Is it that they need to access it to access your company's policies and procedures? Is it that they need to log in to fill out a form for an incident report? It's coming up with those reasons because to be honest, if everyone's busy, if they don't have a reason to use it, then it's going to be really hard to actually get them to use it and to drive that adoption. And to be honest, if they don't need it, then you probably don't need it as an organisation if it's not adding value to your staff. So that's a key thing. And when will they log in and from what device? So we get challenged a lot from organisations whether they're childcare or disability, where they actually are 100% focused on the kids or their clients, that they actually don't have devices on them or with them. So if you want them to check emails or you want them to record notes or those sort of things, when will they do it? Is it that you're going to allocate them 10 minutes after a shift to do it on a shared kiosk sort of computer in the main office, or do they access it from home on their Mac or on their iPhone while they're out and about? So just considering all of these. What information are they looking for? Is it policies, or is it more the casual sort of discussion and peer support that they need? And again, each of these questions dictates the platform. So what tone and style? Is it something you want a very corporate top-down approach where you're pushing out information to your staff, or do you want you give staff your voice to be able to input up to the management and have that discussion? So the other one is what content. Again, we work with all sorts of clients who have confidential information about their clients that maybe they don't want to share, or maybe they should or shouldn't share. So whether they're images of clients who haven't signed a privacy release, or client information that should be better stored on a client management system. So it's reviewing that before you go too far. And are they comfortable using it? Now, to be honest, often people say, no, our staff are not comfortable. They're never going to cope with this sort of new technology. And then when you actually speak to the staff and say, okay, raise your hand who's already using Gmail or Dropbox or Facebook. And any time I've asked that question in a room, I would say 90% of people put up their hand. So this type of technology is getting more user-friendly and more like all the things that people are using in their daily lives and social lives. So, but it is a consideration to look at what training requirements and support they need to be able to use these things. And the other thing with any IT project, what does success look like? And have some KPIs around it. So if you're about to launch a new intranet, well, have some KPIs around, okay, we want 90% of staff logging in the first month, or those type of things, so that you can track whether it's worked or whether it hasn't worked, and whether you need to adjust your approach. So once you've gathered your requirements, then you can start thinking about, okay, well, which part of Office 365 will actually help me achieve that goal? So, and these are just indicatives. Don't take this as gospel, because there are, as we said, more than one way to do it. But if you're just looking at, I just want a couple of my small teams, 5 people in each team to collaborate, and really all they need is a document area to store documents and maybe have some chats, then Office 365 Groups, which is a newish feature of Office 365, could be enough for them. But if you really want to focus on discussion and collaboration, and it's not about documents, then maybe Yammer is a good platform for you. And we will talk about each of these a bit more later. If you want to book rooms and calendars and resources, then yeah, Exchange and the resources as part of that should meet your needs. If you want an intranet, collaborate on documents or boards, then SharePoint's a great tool. Business intelligence and reporting are getting to be a more popular thing, particularly from a management point of view, and Power BI is becoming easier and easier to use. So coming up with a dashboard for your managers is really impressive nowadays, what you can do with some basic tools. Messaging and video conferencing, then Skype for Business is perfect as part of this. Storage of individuals' documents, and maybe share a few of them here and there, OneDrive for Business. As we said, each user gets a terabyte. But if you're looking at more forms and lists and databases and those type of things, SharePoint can suit you. The other thing just on that databases and a range of other things, there may be some cases where Office 365 isn't suitable and you actually need a client management system or some other system, or you still need a file server. So I think that will be the challenge for everyone to work out what to do in Office 365 and what not to do. Project management's the other one that we're seeing getting easier and easier, and all sorts of projects can be used using a SharePoint project site, or Office 365 Planner is another tool that is just been released, as we saw in my screen at the start. So in addition to all of those, there are a whole heap of other things coming out in the future. So Microsoft are investing a lot of money in developing Office 365, and they've got what they've called a roadmap. And this is publicly available, so you can feel free to click on that link after this and have a look at what's coming. And if there is any gaps that you really want it to do, or anything that you're not happy with, then this is the place to go to see whether your problems are going to be solved in the near future. So look, one of the most exciting ones is Cloud PABX, which basically means organizations can replace their phone systems using Skype for Business. Now this is suitable for some organizations, maybe not all. And PSTN conferencing, which basically means a dial-in number for Skype for Business meetings, which will be great for webinars like this. So it'll allow people to dial in as well as use the Skype for Business client. SharePoint Sync tool. So the old Sync tool has been a little bit buggy, and some people have had issues with it, but they are working on it, and it will be released later this year as well. Groups is another one that I mentioned before, where it's collaboration areas, and that whole groups thing is gradually being rolled out across all applications in Office 365. They're also working on SharePoint. Power BI is coming leaps and bounds. The web apps are getting better and better. They're integrating more with Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud-based server platform. So you can rent a server in Azure, but there are a whole heap of other things in Azure around authentication and applications and data modeling and all those sort of things that it's getting better and better. So again, for those of you who do need servers to host applications and maybe don't want them on site for whatever reason, having your server in Azure is getting more and more attractive. Integration with Dynamics. So Dynamics at the moment is CRM and Navision, and that's sort of finance as well as CRM. So Office 365 is getting better and better at integrating those with Office 365 and each other. The other thing that I'll mention just informally is they are also still looking at their donation model, and obviously E1 comes for free, but they're looking at all these other products around what they can do around Azure and what else they can do around CRM and some of these Dynamics products. So I know Microsoft are committed to the sector and are continually looking at how they can donate more and have a bigger impact. So I expect that in the near future there'll be some more announcements around what else Microsoft are donating that they currently don't have donations programs for. Now I did promise I would pause for questions before we get into, after this lot of questions, I'll get into a bit more each application and then some specific things around internet connectivity and business case and those sort of things. So we'll come back to that. But Sean, are there any questions through the chat?
Hi Matt, we haven't had any questions typed through at this point, so I think we can continue with the presentation if you're happy to do so.
Sure. Yep. So yeah, if anyone wants a question, I'll save some time at the end where you can essentially just use the chat feature of the GoToMeeting to send Sean a message, and then he can do that at the end. All right. So after all of that I've talked to, I suppose many of you, and what we're finding, particularly with organisations who don't employ dedicated IT staff or dedicated project managers, and we expect there's probably finance managers on the line, service delivery staff, maybe CEOs. Often it is a bit confusing to know what's next and where to go from here. So I'll go into a bit more detail about what we recommend. So almost always, we recommend that you start with a business case. Now this is non-technical obviously, and this is something that is useful not just for your managers and board, but this is useful for your staff. So we mentioned before around adoption and around getting people to use these products and getting them to look at them positively and make sure they commit the time to go to training if they need to, or try the new products. And usually the whole reason for that is you need to give them a reason to use it. So that could be that it allows them to collaborate better. It could be that it saves them travel time. To be honest, we have some organisations who have, maybe they've paid a few $1,000s to implement Office 365, but in the first 6 months, they've saved $50,000 in travel costs or staff time in travelling just by setting up some video conferencing or some ways to access all the information remotely so that people don't have to get into the office. We have other organisations who move to Office 365 at a time where they're about to replace their server, or their server's crashed or about to crash, and they've been given quotes for $20,000 or whatever it may be to upgrade their server. And so instead of paying that $20,000 to buy the hardware, to do the installation, to buy the software, to buy the licenses, they just go, okay, we're just going to move to Office 365 and spend the effort on that and save a heap of money. So there is a range of different ways, and some of it's about money, but some of it's about quality and creating that single source of truth and making sure that the information is of a higher standard. I'm sure we've all got those really messy file structures on our file servers where you've got hundreds of folders and layers upon layers of folders, and then under the folders you've got naming, conventions that are really confusing, and you've got this one that's the final, and this one's the final, and this one's the final Matt's final, and you never know which one is the right document. So having that central spot where you can just make sure you've got the quality of data is the most important spot. So this building a business case isn't necessarily about writing a 20-page document that says, here's our business case. It's more about picking a few things that just help you justify this both to management and staff. Project staging is another one that we always get people to think about. Now, if you're a small organisation, probably half of these steps won't be suitable for you or relevant, but I just put it in there to give you a sense of some of the steps that you can follow to make sure you're ready. Now, each organisation is different, and to be honest, we have some organisations who come to us and say, oh, quick, we've got all of our applications hosted on this other platform with another provider, and we want to get them all off, and we want to do it all on one weekend, and we want to do it, in 2 months' time. Can you help us? And in some cases, you have to do it all at once. We have other organisations that say, oh yeah, look, we're reasonably happy with our file server and these other things, but we want to get rid of email and move gradually over the next 12 months. And this is the type of approach that we would do for that organisation, where it's really about getting the business case right, Review and scoping, so that's about, okay, well, what applications do you use, like the table that we showed a few slides ago. Do we need Yammer for that? Do we need SharePoint? Do we need Exchange? Do we need Power BI? And then prepare your environment. So that means, and I've got some slides coming up about this, but you know, are the computers that you're on adequate? Is the internet connection that you're on adequate? Are your staff ready? Do you have the licenses? Now, for some organisations, particularly larger organisations, you get the ability to be able to run a pilot group or a demo and do some testing. So a lot of people have some valuable sort of views there where you can spend some time just getting a sense of what it could be like and explore and get a group to test it. Authentication, so that's about making sure you're, and you, again, this isn't suitable for everyone, but making sure your usernames and passwords could be the same for your local environment to your Office 365. And many organisations do email and Skype for Business first, and then many then start the process to do SharePoint design and information architecture. That's what IA means. And that's looking at your folder structures and how to set up your documents. And then maybe they do SharePoint build a few months later after email and launch that with some change management and training. And then down the track, maybe they start using OneDrive and Yammer and video, and then the last stage is business intelligence and Power BI. So again, it's more about focusing on things that add value to your organisation and doing it in a way that works for your organisation based on your priorities. So maybe your priorities are, we have some organisations who say, actually my email is quite fine, can we just use Yammer? And that's perfectly fine as well. We have some that just use Skype for Business, and that's okay. So just consider the whole staging process. So now I'm going to talk about each application and some things to think about for each application. So Exchange Online is obviously the most common one. And to be honest, it's one that makes the most sense and is often the easiest change. We have some organisations who move from an on-premises Exchange server on the server in your office to Office 365, and in many cases staff don't even notice, because essentially a lot of staff are using Outlook to access their emails and calendars, and you can use Outlook using any email system. So if you're using Outlook, essentially all you have to do is change where your Outlook points after you do the project. So we do somewhere, we go in over a weekend after we've done the migration, we configure everyone's Outlook to move from their old system to now point to Office 365, and on Monday the staff log in and they keep working, and it's, you know, essentially the same. Although we have others that are on different systems that everything's new and different. So again, really depends. You can use Office and Outlook 2013 and 2016 on your desktops. And to be honest, normally we recommend that. Personally, I use Office 2016 for Outlook. Occasionally I use a web portal from home or from other sort of PCs and from the iPad, but mostly I still use Office 2016, and that's usually what we recommend people install as part of an email migration project. As we said, you get unlimited email accounts for all staff, volunteers and boards. So in many cases now there aren't really that many reasons not to give everyone an account. Traditionally, I know a lot of organisations have just had email accounts for their head office staff, and all the service delivery staff and volunteers and boards haven't had accounts, because often it's been a cost impact to get a new license and to set them up. But now it's free, you can have unlimited. There's no reason why you can't just give everyone an email account, all based on their name. Shared resources, so some of you used to use public folders, but now it's all about booking So right now I'm sitting in a meeting room. I've booked that meeting room through my Outlook. I've basically sent it an invite, and now everyone knows that I'm in this room and it's in my calendar. But with Exchange Online, the hard bit really is the migration of data. So to be honest, if you were a brand new organisation and you just wanted to set up a tenant and set up some new accounts, it'd actually be a pretty easy process to set up email. But to make sure all the data and all the calendars and all the contacts and everything comes over, that's the bit that takes a bit of work. So to do that work, to get all the information over, there's a few different options. Unfortunately, I can't just say, hey, here's exactly how you do it, step by step, for all organisations. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as that. We sort of break them into those categories there. Now, there are other ones, but these are the most common ones that we see. To be honest, if you're a smallish organisation under 30 accounts and you've got limited budget, you can do the migration of data reasonably manually. So if you're using Outlook, you can export your PST file and import it into your new Office 365. So that is probably the cheapest and easiest way to do it. But again, if you've got 100 staff, that's probably not going to be an efficient way to do it, and it means that you know, there's more risk when you do it the manual way. And this means that you're using Outlook basically. If you're using Gmail or some of those other non-Microsoft mail systems, you can use what's called IMAP and do an automated transfer between things like Gmail to Office 365. One of the limitations to that is it doesn't copy your calendars and contacts. So to be honest, a lot of the time when we have those sort of migrations, we use third-party tools, which is the other one down there, where it's a bit more user-friendly for the guys doing it. It's a bit less risk, and it brings across all of your information. There are costs associated with third-party tools, but usually we find it's worth it. Third-party tools are also good if you've got unreliable servers and you just need it done all in one night. You know, so on Friday everyone's using an old Gmail, and then on Monday you want everyone to use Office 365. Then that's usually the approach. Microsoft also have developed tools to help you migrate. There's two main ones that we use. One's called the cutover exchange migration and one's called the hybrid. So cutover basically is anywhere between 30 and 100 users, and you're happy to migrate all on one night. Then what the cutover does, it basically connects your Exchange server and Office 365, and it syncs the data across. And then the day after the migration, you go around and configure Outlook to the Office 365, and then voila, you start using Office 365. Most larger organisations, or ones who need staging, and you know, different departments on different days or weeks, usually go for what we call a hybrid deployment, where it means your Exchange server can operate at the same time as Office 365 for a period of time. So some people have hybrid environments for 12 months. Some just have it for a month while they're doing it. So what that really requires, it's fairly technical setup. Our engineers are getting good at it, but it still takes a fair bit of time. You basically can migrate small groups at a time and have that synchronized between Exchange and Office 365. So they're the different types. So look, if you're talking to your local provider, I'd ask the question, how are you doing the migration? What type are we doing? And reference these five. as the main ones. All right, moving on to SharePoint. Now again, SharePoint's a really flexible tool that can be lots of things to lots of different people. So each organisation we work with, to be honest, uses SharePoint a little bit differently, and it can do lots of things reasonably well. What traditionally SharePoint was for was a company intranet. So large organisations or a lot of medium-sized organisations have that central portal where they store all their documents, all their news from their CEO, all of central information where all staff can log in. Now, we're helping a lot of organisations do that right now, and for organisations who need an intranet, it's a really good tool and obviously pretty free. Some organisations, particularly really smaller orgs, are using it basically as a file server replacement. So it does document management reasonably well, it does version history and co-authoring and permissions, and you can set up the file structures however you want. So some people essentially just dump their file server or go through a process to clean it up is usually what we prefer and recommend, to use SharePoint as a document repository and a document management system. And in some cases that means they can get rid of the file server. Not always, but in some. The other thing I would say is it's not perfect for everything. So in some cases you may still need a local server, and having local storage for large files or backups or videos and those sort of things can also make sense. So for example, if you're on a poor internet connection, you don't want to be storing really large videos and images on your SharePoint if you're downloading them up and down all day, every day. So consider what you use SharePoint for and what's the most suitable for your environment and your infrastructure. The other thing that it can do is forms and lists for admin. So I've used SharePoint for incident reporting, for IT issues logs, for maintenance requests, for timesheets, for leave requests, all sorts of things where basically it's pretty flexible, where you can just set up a list with a form attached that inputs data, and then you can view that data in a way that suits each user. So again, you can explore how to do that. The other thing that it's really good at is those collaboration sites. So whether you're a team or a board or a project, so it does project management sites, they're really the key things that SharePoint does well. So the other thing though, before you sort of launch off into dumping all your documents onto SharePoint, is to really consider change management and training. So what we do find is that SharePoint, moving all your documents to SharePoint, is one of the biggest impacts that you can have on users. It is something that documents is what they do all day, every day, a lot of staff. So just moving things without training or consultation or change management is a bit of a risk. And usually when we move, we recommend that you take it as an opportunity to look at your information architecture. So that's basically, okay, let's just not dump everything as it is. Let's look at our folders. Let's look at our naming conventions. Let's look at our structures. Let's look at, do we need to keep these documents or can we archive them somewhere else? So that's a really highly recommended process that we spend a lot of time with organizations on. And to be honest, most SharePoint implementations are very non-technical, and most of the time is around cleaning up the documents, working out what the best way to set it up. The technical bit of SharePoint, where you actually create the site, isn't hard at all or time-consuming. So this is really a project where it shouldn't be IT-led. It should really be admin-led or management-led, and departments like the marketing department or HR, they should really be the ones that have a vested interest in this, not just IT. So that's the key with SharePoint, is exploring who else you can get involved and not necessarily a highly technical person. All right. The one confusing bit, I like to put this slide in just to clarify. OneDrive for Business, we typically recommend for individuals. So you get an account per person for 1 terabyte each. So personally, I use it for my working documents. Nothing really critical that if I leave or if I delete everything, that it really matters. And it's mainly things for me. I occasionally share some things that I want to share with a small group, but essentially anything I want to share with my team, I put on my SharePoint library. So that's often the differentiation, to say anything for your whole organization or your team, put in a SharePoint library. Anything for a user is OneDrive. SharePoint is going to live on regardless of whether I leave or whoever leaves InfoExchange. OneDrive is per user. Now you can archive that and access it afterwards if you need to, but really that's the differentiation. Both of these can be synced to your local PC using what we call the OneDrive sync tool and the desktop client, which means you can access it offline. So they both use the same tool. The SharePoint tool is actually getting upgraded in a couple of months, but so it means I can work on the plane and I can work on this presentation, and then when the plane lands and I connect back to the internet, it synchronizes my changes back up, and it does that in a smart way where it tells anyone else who's using the document what I've changed and those sort of things. So that's often a confusing thing. The other key application that organizations are getting great value of is Skype for Business. So essentially it's very similar to the commercial home version of Skype, but it is something that you get as part of Office 2016 Pro Plus. So essentially, as far as an implementation, all you really need to do in most cases is log in. So it's just an adoption thing of getting people to see what the functionality is, and then just considering those infrastructure things like your internet connections or your headsets. Do you share with external people or not? And I mentioned before, later in the year, there will be integrated with PSTN and PABX, sort of essentially your phone system or your dial-in number. And that will be part of an E5 plan that Microsoft will release, coming late this year, hopefully. Yammer is another one that people are starting to use a lot. I really like Yammer and encourage it for a lot of organizations, particularly larger organizations or diverse when you're across multiple locations. So you can create customized groups for each team, whether it be geographic or topical based. So whether it's your HR team or just a topic. I know at InfoExchange we've got, we're planning to be carbon neutral and we're doing all these things for the environment. So we've got a greening InfoExchange group that anyone interested in that logs onto that group and sees what's happening with LED lights and other things like that. So you can use those however you want. You can create your own groups, or users can create their groups as well. One thing that we're seeing some of our clients do is actually use it as an external network for some of their clients. Now in the education space or in other space, it's really good to be able to give your members or clients a platform to communicate in a forum that you manage, essentially. So that is something to consider. It's not suitable for everything, not suitable for all clients. It's really all about discussions. It's not 100% focused on documents or providing them with sort of information in an intranet sort of way. It's more about providing a platform for discussion and news. A bit like a Facebook for business, really. And there's a good mobile app there too, which one of those images is on. You can integrate with SharePoint, and yeah, I think like everything else, just encourage adoption and people like CEOs are really good at pushing that adoption and giving people a reason to come into Yammer. I've seen many a Yammer site just sitting there empty, not being used. So having a purpose for that content is important. Look, again, I'm not going to run through all of these, but these are things that each organisation should consider as far as an infrastructure point of view before you just run off and implement Office 365. A lot of these might not be relevant to you, and if you're not technical, the point of this slide is you could take this slide or some of these questions at least and go to your support provider and say, hey, what are we doing about authentication? Am I going to have the same username and password for my local as my Office 365, or are we doing it separately? Do we need a local server or do we not? Okay, this is an online platform. What are we doing if the internet goes down? Am I going to have a local backup or some offline files? Do my scanners work with Office 365? So if I want to scan to email, it uses Office 365. Mobile devices. So if I'm going to have all my staff using, storing all my organizational data in their OneDrive and accessing it on mobiles, am I implementing mobile device management so that I can wipe it if something happens? Is my internet good enough? What am I doing about training and change management? How am I getting my data from existing systems? Does my current IT provider support Office 365? And who's going to create new users and manage my tenant once it's set up? So what version of Office am I on? Is 2016, can I upgrade to 2016, or is 2013 okay? Which it is. So look, I don't mean to bombard everyone with too many questions, but it's more just things to think about. Unfortunately, I can't give you all the answers today, and as we say, it's different for everyone. But here's a few things to think about. Just drilling in a little bit more detail on a couple of those. Internet connectivity is always a question we get, and I'm conscious of time. I'll skim through this really quickly. You will get these slides too, so you can use this, but really there's no one answer for internet. It's all about what data you're putting across your internet and how many users you've got essentially, and what type of internet. So yeah, if you've just got a couple of users and you're just emailing, ADSL should be fine. To be honest, if you're just emailing now on Exchange or Gmail and then you move to Office 365 and you're still just emailing, your internet requirements aren't going to change. But if you start using video conferencing and syncing lots of large libraries and all those sort of things, you will use up more bandwidth. So I would consider anyone over sort of 30 staff, or to start looking at those commercial style sort of connections, whether it's an Ethernet or a fiber connection. Now you can get them for $200 a month. You can get a synchronous Ethernet connection, which means that you get better upload and download speeds. So often your ADSL, you don't have good upload speeds, which can cause some issues. So I'll leave that one with you, but yeah, that's something to think about. Mobility we've already talked about. But yeah, the mobile apps, there are 20 of them right there that are purely for Office 365. So give them a go. They're much better than using like the Apple Mail client, for example. And I would strongly recommend exploring mobile device management if that is something you're going to do if your users are going to start using that. Privacy and security, if anyone's interested, there's some links in there. It's now hosted in Australia. Large organisations are on it. And it's more about what information are you storing. The Privacy Act is really just focused on client information. So it's more about if your clients' phone numbers and email accounts and those sort of things get leaked. So if you're just emailing around, then you shouldn't be emailing around your client data anyway. So often we're finding that privacy and security isn't a barrier anymore, but there's more information there. So top tips, I'm going to try and finish in 2 minutes. Really, as we've said, just pick the bits that are most valuable and don't feel you have to do it all at once. Build your business case and explain the benefits to staff and use that champion model. So we often tell our clients that InfoExchange shouldn't actually go out and do end user training. You should actually we train the trainers or train the champions and get them to show them how to use Outlook and just basic things that aren't really highly technical. Often it's better when a colleague shows you something, or that peer-to-peer support and training. So often we find that's a better model than getting some external person to come in and run training on how to save things in Word. Bandwidth, upgrade to 2016. 2013 is perfectly fine, but 2016 is better. Office 365 Expert, often we and other organisations can just come in and help you with this migration, and then you keep using your existing support provider if they have a good idea of how to use Office 365, but maybe don't do migrations on a regular basis. So really, yeah, test your current support provider and see if it's something that they support. But if not, get an expert in. We've seen some horror stories of people that have lost data and those sort of things trying to do it themselves. In other cases, we've seen people who have IT staff that have attended our do-it-yourself workshops or access some online information that could do it themselves. So again, there's not one answer, unfortunately. Review your security controls and usage policies. So usually it's a good, the most insecure part about any system is the users. And if you're putting post-it notes with passwords on monitors and those sort of things, or having 20 people log into the same account, they're your biggest risks, not necessarily what Microsoft are doing. So have a look at that. Have a look at local storage. Active Directory could be synchronized so that you've got one username and password if you've got for larger orgs. Online collaboration, you can do it in whether it's SharePoint, Yammer or groups, but it is something that most boards and teams will see value in. And really just, as we've said the whole session, make sure each application has a purpose and it adds value. So next steps and more information, we have readiness assessments. So through Connecting Up, basically that would talk through, do an assessment on your organisation and then give you a bit of a implementation plan that you could either use to do yourself or get your local support provider to do it, or we also give you an indicative quote to give you a sense of how much it would cost to get an external person like InfoExchange to do it for you. I mentioned do-it-yourself workshops. If you've got someone that's pretty tech-savvy and wants to try and do it themselves, there's another round coming up in August where we can show you how to do email and SharePoint and advanced email. So have a look at those on Connecting Up, and we've got some more webinars, and obviously InfoExchange can help you as well, but that wasn't what today was about. It's more about giving you some information so that you know what the next steps are. All right. I think I'm maybe 1 or 2 minutes late, but I'll throw into questions. Happy to hang around and answer anyone's questions.
Great, thanks Matt. Yeah, we have had a few questions come through. So first one being from Mark, who asked, what is the best way to have shared contact databases using Office 365? Is this in Outlook, and if so, can you have categories that sync across all users?
Yeah, so the definition of a shared contact database is, you know, there are lots of different ways you can do that. Is it a client management system? No. Is it a CRM which is designed for tracking communication for all your contacts and those sort of things? No, Microsoft has a separate product for that. But you can, and what we do with many organisations is you can have Exchange contacts, so external contacts that you put in there, and then you create different distribution lists around that. So you can definitely do that as part of Exchange. and that's, I'm assuming, what you mean by categories, where you would just load each contact in once so that it's a single use. So if that person changes their phone number, then you edit it once, and then you might have that person in 2 or 3 different distribution lists, and that's okay, but it's still referring to the one central contact. You can do some contacts and sort of mini databases in SharePoint as well. So that person could be an item in a SharePoint list, and then if you want to track information about that individual, you can do that too. I hope that answered the question. As we said, I'm happy to take emails if there's more detail.
Great, thank you, Matt. Our next question is from Russell, who asks, are any tools required for the hybrid migration method, or are there inbuilt Exchange tools?
Basically, it's Microsoft tools that you run on Exchange. So I can there are prerequisites to get you to the level of a hybrid, but you basically connect your Exchange with Office 365. So you do have to install a couple of things on your Exchange and make sure it's at the right level. But particularly if it's a more recent 2013 server, then it should be fine. Some of the older servers don't do hybrids very well, or some of the older versions of Exchange, so you may need to upgrade. Yeah, you don't need to go off and buy any third-party tools or anything like that. And there is information on how to do that on TechNet, which is Microsoft's sort of knowledge base. Or again, we can help with that, as we do these on a regular basis as well. And we will cover hybrids in the DIY workshop. So if you are thinking of trying it yourself and just need a few tips, Joey, who's one of our senior engineers, he sets up hybrids all day, every day. He'll be running a do-it-yourself workshop on that with me in September, I think.
Terrific, thanks, Matt. Our next question is from Cliff, who asks, does Exchange Online include out-of-office features?
Yes, it does. Yep, by default.
Perfect. And our next question is from Mitzi, who asks, are there any issues with using both personal Office 365 and a company's Office 365 on her personal laptop?
Yeah, they will always be separate. So when you say personal, I'm assuming, yeah, you've gone to Officeworks or something like that and bought that. What could be confusing is the logins and authentication between the two, and the versions of Office. So if you've gone off and installed Office and Word and all those sort of things separately, then yeah, by default they will reference that Office 365 account. The other thing you can do though is you can use as many accounts as you want in different browsers and just use the web portal. If it gets really confusing, then you could just use one of those accounts through the web portal. And so yes, there are some niggly confusing things. Often if you use 2 accounts on the same computer, both a personal and a corporate, but you can do it, yes.
Thank you, Matt. And this looks to be our final question from Mark, who is just asking, do you know if many businesses are removing their internal file storage servers completely and then replacing them with things like OneDrive for Business? And if so, what would be the pros and cons?
Yeah, I actually have a whole other webinar on that around managing your infrastructure in server versus cloud. But usually it comes back to the size of the organization and the efficiencies. So we have moved, I would say probably 3/4 of our clients, at least half, are now moving away from local file servers and are doing most of their file storage in SharePoint. So not OneDrive. OneDrive is for individuals' files, so like their local C drive or their local H drive commonly. And organizational data that used to be on a file server is suitable for SharePoint. often what the key driver is what else does that server do? Is it hosting client databases? Is it storing, or is it managing your group policy and user management? Is it pushing out automated software via group policy? And a heap of these other functions that servers do, that if you take them away, it can actually lose some efficiency, where you have to, if you have to go around and update Adobe on 30 computers, it can take you a while to do that manually, whereas if you've got a server, you can do it in a more automated way. But purely from a document point of view, SharePoint document management is typically a lot better and has a range of other functionalities around version histories and co-authoring and permissions than you get on a file server. And it means you can access it remotely from anywhere and from mobile apps and a range of things. What the only con, one of the main cons is the sync tool can still be a little buggy and take some management, but again, they're upgrading that in a couple of months. So look, I definitely think if you're a smaller organisation, yeah, it's definitely worth considering. So I think my next webinar, server versus cloud infrastructure, is in a month. The other consideration is Microsoft has hosted servers that you can essentially go and rent a server in Microsoft's data center in Azure, which is what we do for some organizations. So one of our clients has a file server in Azure for some things, and particularly their archives, and they have their Active Directory and a few other things in a file server. But then they use SharePoint for a lot of their other documents and shared documents, and then they use OneDrive for their personal. So I think usually a hybrid model is best.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. I reckon we've reached the end of our questions for today. So before closing off, is there anything more that you wanted to add?
No, I think, look, I think this type of webinar wasn't designed to give you every answer. Unfortunately, it is a process that you need to go through, and hopefully this is the start of your journey. Happy to help. Feel free to give me an email and I can give you some free advice as the next stage. But I think it is something that's becoming more and more popular and common across the sector. So I'm sure it would have some use for almost all organisations. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon, hopefully.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Matt, for presenting a great webinar today, and thank you everyone for joining as well. If you do have any further questions from today's webinar, please feel free to send them to Matt at mwalton@infoexchange.org, or you can always send them through to us, events@connectingup.org, and we can pass them on. Lastly, don't forget a recording of the presentation and a copy of Matt's slides will be sent to you all in the coming days, so please keep a lookout in your inboxes. So thanks again and enjoy the rest of your day.